I had just moved into the house, a place that was supposed to be my fresh start. This was my chance to begin again, to put down roots in a new space, and to leave behind memories I didn't want to carry with me anymore. As I walked through the rooms, everything still felt new, almost untouched. The faint smell of fresh paint lingered in the air, mixing with the scent of the cardboard boxes that were still scattered around, half open and waiting to be unpacked. Some rooms were bare, but in a way, I liked that. It felt like a blank canvas, ready to become whatever I needed it to be. Even though I hadn't fully settled in, it already felt like home. There was a quietness to the neighborhood that soothed me, a kind of gentle calm that I hadn't realized I'd been craving for so long. Outside, I could hear the occasional chirp of birds and the soft rustling of leaves as a breeze drifted by. The street was peaceful, lined with tall trees that created a canopy overhead, shading the sidewalk and casting gentle shadows on the ground. I spent the day unpacking little by little, arranging my things as carefully as I could, hoping to make the space my own. I placed familiar items on shelves, hung a few favorite pictures, and found spots for the small things that made me feel grounded. A cozy blanket, my favorite mug, a few well-worn books. By the time the sun began to set, casting a warm glow through the windows, I was tired, but it was a good kind of tired. My body ached from lifting boxes and shifting furniture, but my heart felt light, filled with a sense of hope and quiet satisfaction. As I looked around, I felt a surge of relief. This house was more than just walls and a roof. It was a new beginning, a place where I could finally breathe again. I felt like I had found a space that was truly mine, and for the first time in a long while, I felt safe. That night, I followed my usual routine. I brushed my teeth, letting the cool mint linger on my tongue, and washed my face, feeling the warm water splash over my skin, washing away the day. The familiar motions helped me unwind, and I slipped into my soft pajamas, relishing the comfort they brought. I took a moment to look around my new home, feeling a quiet pride settle over me. The walls were still bare, and a few boxes lay scattered around, yet to be unpacked. But even with things unfinished, it already felt like mine. Each corner held a hint of the life I was building here. My favorite lamp cast a soft glow over the living room, and the faint scent of fresh paint mixed with the lavender candle I'd lit earlier, giving the place a cozy warmth. There was a stillness in the air, a sense of calm that made me feel, for the first time in a while, like I was right where I needed to be. I crawled into bed, wrapping myself in the blankets, letting the warmth surround me. I closed my eyes, expecting to drift off easily, but as the silence settled in, a strange feeling crept over me. I couldn't quite put my finger on it. Something felt off. It was as if the shadows seemed darker, the quiet too deep, like the house was holding its breath along with me. I shifted, brushing the thought aside, telling myself it was just the nerves of sleeping in a new place. My mind was just playing tricks on me, nothing more. I had finally found a place where I was safe. At least, that's what I wanted to believe. Then I heard it, a faint sound from outside, so soft I almost missed it. I told myself it was nothing, just the neighborhood settling down for the night. But the noise grew louder. Footsteps. My heart started to race as I realized that someone was outside, moving closer to my door. The footsteps grew louder, each one pressing down with a slow, steady rhythm that sent a chill up my spine. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it echo in my ears. Then I heard it, a sharp, metallic scrape at the door, like someone jamming something hard against the lock, trying to force it open. My whole body went rigid, paralyzed with fear, as if the very air around me had turned thick and heavy. I reached for my phone, my hand shaking so badly that my fingers fumbled over the screen. I tried to unlock it, but my fingers slipped, trembling too much to press the right buttons. My mind screamed at me, every instinct begging me to hurry, to get help, but my body felt numb and sluggish. Just as I finally managed to unlock the screen, I heard a loud, bone-jarring bang. The door crashed open, the sound like an explosion that seemed to shake the walls. In shock, my fingers lost their grip on the phone, and it fell from my hands, landing with a soft, almost mocking thud on the carpet. I watched it, helpless, as the footsteps grew louder, filling the entryway with a weight and presence that made the space feel smaller, closing in around me. I was paralyzed, rooted in place as three figures entered. Their faces were hidden, but I could see the cold purpose in their eyes. They hadn't come here by accident. My new home, my safe space, was theirs now. I tried to make myself small, pressing my body low to the floor as I inched toward the bed. My heart pounded in my chest, every beat echoing in my ears as I crawled quietly, trying to stay out of their sight. I slipped under the bed, the only place I could think to hide, my hands trembling as I pressed myself flat against the cold floorboards. The darkness under the bed felt tight and suffocating, but it was the only barrier I had between myself and the intruders. My whole body was tense, every muscle locked in fear, as I lay there listening to their heavy footsteps and the low rumble of their voices. My breathing was shallow, and I tried to control it, worried that even the slightest sound might give me away. I clung to a fragile hope that they would take what they wanted and leave, that this nightmare would somehow end without them finding me. I tried to convince myself that they wouldn't look here, that maybe they'd already found enough and would be gone any second now. But just as a small flicker of relief started to form in my mind, I froze. Through the small gap between the floor and the edge of the bed, I saw them, a pair of scuffed, dark boots stopping right next to where I was hiding. They were so close, just inches from my face, close enough that I could see every scratch, every bit of dirt clinging to the leather. In that moment, my stomach dropped, and I felt my heart stop as the terrible reality settled over me. They were closer than I had dared to imagine, and my hiding spot was no longer safe. One of them crouched down, his face partly hidden in shadows, but the dim hallway light caught just enough of his features. His eyes were dark, almost hollow, and his expression twisted in a way that sent a chill deep into my bones. There was something cold and heartless in his look, something that felt less like anger and more like satisfaction, like he enjoyed seeing the fear in my eyes. I barely had time to process what was happening before his hand shot out and clamped around my wrist. His grip was strong, unyielding, and his fingers dug into my skin, cold and unforgiving. It felt like a shackle, binding me in place with no chance of breaking free. He yanked me out from under the bed, and the force of it made my whole body jolt. My shoulders scraped against the floor, and a sharp pain shot up my arm, but I was too terrified to notice anything but his grasp, as solid as iron. I felt frozen, every part of me seized by fear. My mind was blank, empty of any thought except one: survival. My chest felt tight, my heart racing so fast I could hardly breathe, but somehow I managed to find my voice, even if it was just a whisper. "Please," I murmured, barely audible, my voice trembling with desperation. "Take whatever you want. Just leave me alone." The words felt weak, pitiful, like a child's plea, but it was all I had. I didn't know if he even heard me. I could hardly hear myself over the pounding of my own heart. His face remained unchanged, cold and indifferent, as if my words meant nothing, as if my fear was nothing but a part of his twisted enjoyment. I felt the hopelessness sinking in, a heavy weight pressing down on me, knowing that nothing I said would make a difference. The men rifled through my things with such disregard, scattering my belongings across the floor as they pocketed anything valuable, jewelry, cash, whatever they could find. I watched, helpless, my heart breaking as they tore apart what little I had. But then, as they finished taking everything of worth, I realized with a sickening certainty that they weren't done with me. They turned toward me, their eyes like ice, empty and without a shred of mercy. I felt the room shrink, as though the walls were closing in, trapping me with no escape. My heart raced as I realized what they wanted. It wasn't enough that they'd torn my home apart and stolen my belongings. Now, they wanted to take something far worse. A chill swept over me, my body frozen with terror. My voice cracked as I pleaded, my words trembling, desperate for them to stop, to leave me alone. "Please, don't do this," I whispered, barely able to force the words out, but they looked right through me, unmoved and indifferent. My voice, my pleas, meant nothing to them. They had come for valuables, but their eyes showed a darker desire. It was as though they saw me as another object, something they could use and discard. without care. One of them grabbed my wrist, his grip rough, pulling me closer as I tried to back away. Panic surged through me as I tried to twist free, but it was no use. My strength was gone, drained by fear, leaving me weak and helpless in their hands. What happened after, I can barely even think about, let alone say out loud. They forced me into one humiliating position after another, each demand stripping away a part of me, each moment feeling endless. They took turns, their rough hands and laughter filling the silence, as if what they were doing was somehow a game to them. It wasn't just my body they violated that night. They stole my sense of safety, my trust, my dignity, things that can never be returned. By the time they finally finished, they had taken more than I even knew I had. I felt hollow, as if they had emptied me out, leaving nothing but a broken shell with trembling limbs that could barely hold me up. I lay there, staring blankly at the ceiling, numb to everything. The silence that filled the room after they left was louder than any sound. I couldn't move, couldn't cry, couldn't even think. All that was left was a heavy emptiness pressing down on me, making it hard to breathe, hard to feel anything at all. As I lay there, the laughter of those men still echoed in my mind, a haunting reminder of the nightmare I had just endured. They had taken what they wanted and left, but the scars they left behind would remain with me forever. For what felt like hours, I lay there on the floor, curled up and paralyzed, as if my body had forgotten how to move. The numbness settled deep into my bones, and I felt hollow, too broken to even cry. Time seemed to stretch, each second dragging painfully, and all I could do was stare blankly at the walls around me. It felt as though the world had lost its color, like everything had been drained and left in shades of gray. The silence was heavy, pressing down on me, making it hard to breathe. Eventually, I forced myself to get up, though every part of me protested. My legs wobbled beneath me as I stumbled toward the bathroom, gripping the walls to keep myself steady. The cold tiles felt harsh under my feet, grounding me in the reality I wanted to escape. I reached the sink, my hands trembling as I leaned against it, trying to find the strength to look up. I didn't want to see my reflection, didn't want the mirror to confirm the damage I could feel so deeply inside. But I couldn't avoid it forever. When I finally lifted my gaze, the woman staring back at me was unrecognizable. Her eyes were swollen and red, surrounded by dark shadows that seemed to sink deep into her skin. Her face was pale, almost ghostly, with blotches of bruises forming along her cheek and jaw. Her lips were chapped, a small cut still fresh at the corner. She looked fragile, as though a single touch could shatter her. That was me, yet it didn't feel like me. The person in the mirror was a stranger, someone who had been through something unspeakable, someone I didn't know, someone I didn't want to know. I turned away, unable to bear the sight. I felt a deep ache, not just in my body but in my very soul, like a part of me had been lost. The woman in the mirror was what remained, a fragile shell of the person I had been, haunted by a darkness I could still feel creeping inside me. In the days that followed, I tried to go on, tried to convince myself that I was okay, that the hurt would pass. But my new home, my safe haven, was now a place of nightmares. Every shadow seemed darker, every creak louder, each noise filling me with fear. I couldn't even bear to look at the spot where they'd stood, where they'd taken everything from me. I knew I needed help, but even that felt impossible. Talking to the police, to friends, to anyone, each word made the horror more real. It felt like reliving every second of that night, like opening a wound that would never fully heal. But slowly, I reached out. Little by little, I started to tell my story, first to the police, then to a therapist. Each time I spoke, the weight grew a little lighter, and I could feel pieces of myself returning. The fear was still there, lingering like a shadow, but somehow, so was something else, strength. They had taken so much from me, but they hadn't destroyed me. Day by day, I found myself again, fragile yet resilient, shattered but surviving. My home would never be the same, and neither would I. But I knew I had a choice, to live in fear or to reclaim my life, piece by painful piece. And so I chose to live. not as a victim, but as someone who had seen the worst and found a way to survive. The scars they left are still there, and they always will be. But those scars, they don't define me. I'm more than what they tried to take. I am here, still standing, with a story of survival, not defeat. For as long as I live, I will remember that night. But I will also remember the strength it took to keep going, to face each day, and to believe that I could heal. They stole a part of me that night, but what they left behind is stronger than I ever knew.